Here's another really important question. Who really owns the copyright that you think you own? A lot of people think that they own the copyright to everything they create. In a lot of circumstances, that's true. In other circumstances, no, it's not. If you are a full-time employee of a company, your company, well, depending on the type of work you do, but in most cases, in almost all cases, your company owns the copyright to any material you create on the job. If you are being paid for your time, or if you're being paid for the time that you use to create something, that creation is owned by your employer. 100%. You have no rights to it. Now, there are challenges to that, like everything else. You could make arguments to a point. You could say, I'm a graphic artist, and everything that I draw for my employer is his. But I wrote this, novel, and yes, I happen to work on it a little bit on company time, but it's completely, unrelated to my job function. That's an argument you could make. Whether you would prevail or the employer would prevail on ownership, pretty much up to the judge. Even if your contract with your employer doesn't specifically state that anything you create on the job the employer owns, U.S. law has upheld many, many, many times that your employer owns it. Some employees, some contracts, particularly in some creative fields, but mostly in scientific research fields, some contracts actually state that anything you create while you're employed, even if you're off the clock, is owned by your employer. So if you create a car that runs on air in your garage on the weekends, your employer could own it. Actually, that'd be a patent, but hopefully you get the point on that. If you're a contract employee, your contract, meaning a freelancer who agrees to do a gig, or somebody who's brought in for a temporary, as a temp employee, or someone who's brought in for to complete one project and then you're gone. Your contract may use the phrase "made for hire." If it does, everything you do under the terms of that contract are owned 100% by the employer. Your name will never be associated with it. And the law doesn't require it. In fact, the law discourages it. If you're a full-time employee, if it's made for hire. Basically, all of this is covered under made for hire terms. If you're a full-time employee or you sign an agreement that says made for hire, or if you don't sign an agreement and nobody stipulates who owns the copyright, in most cases the employer gets it anyway. And your name will never be associated with it. The employer will own the copyright as if the employing entity was the creator. This is real easy to miss. A lot of freelancers, a lot of creative people get into trouble because, and I'll tell you, I know a guy that this happened to just about 1.5 years ago. He got sued for displaying work that he created for a client in his own portfolio on his website. He got sued and he lost because, yes, he created it, but he created it under made-for-hire terms. He didn't sign an agreement that said made-for-hire. He just didn't sign an agreement at all. And the court said, well, you were given specific instructions on how to design this and how to put it together and what the client was looking for, ergo, you were making something that was for hire. Ergo, you don't own it. Your client owns all of the rights to it, and the client has not granted you the right to reproduce this material and present it in your portfolio. So he got off lucky. He was a freelancer, and the client said, well, okay, well, we don't need We don't need any kind of financial restitution. Just take it out of your portfolio and never display it again, never talk about it again, and we'll be fine. But he could have wound up owing them 150 grand, and he could have possibly done jail time for displaying his own work. Which brings me to 5 ways you could lose the rights in and to your work.